roll right into our champions panel so we can hear from airlines, law enforcement, and conservation. And so if I could ask our panelists to go ahead and turn their cameras and microphones on, I'm so grateful to have a great roundup here with us today. We're joined by Balaji Bigantivalli. Balaji, you are the environment manager for Qatar Airways Group, responsible for the development and maintenance of the group's environmental management systems and its standards for the transportation of wildlife and animal welfare and addressing illegal wildlife transportation. Roseanne Blijleven, you currently work preventing wildlife trafficking at Amsterdam Airport Schiphol. And I know Schiphol is a proud signatory of the Buckingham Palace Declaration and chair of ACI's Wildlife Trafficking Task Force. We're also joined by Anas Izadi from your post in Kuala Lumpur. You champion anti-wildlife trafficking efforts at Malaysia Airline Group and lead the group's knowledge management school. Unfortunately, your colleague Syed could not be with us today. But we're also grateful to have the presence of Miguel Salamanca. And Miguel, you are a canine guide specialized in wildlife detection and have participated in over 6,000 seizures of different species of wildlife and have helped spearhead work with Bogota Airport on stopping the illegal wildlife trade. And we also are grateful for the presence of you, Ian Cruikshank, because you manage the Transport Task Force for United for Wildlife, setting up and running regional task forces around the world focused on ending the illegal wildlife trade. Welcome to all of our panelists, and thank you so much for being here. Before we jump into questions, I'm going to suggest, because I know Miguel will be speaking mostly in Spanish, that for those of us who want to listen just to that, when Miguel is speaking, we should drop into the English channel. So if you go down to the bottom of your screen, you'll see an interpretation icon down there, and you can drop into the English channel. If you need to speak and listen in Spanish, you can drop into the Spanish channel. If you stay in the main room, you'll hear both interpretations, I believe. So just preparing you for that. Well, with that, again, I want to welcome all of our panelists, and we're so grateful to have all of you with us. I want to dive right into our conversation. And Owen, if you could maybe take the slide down and we can just see our panelists. Thank you. I want to start by asking each of you if you could tell us a story about your involvement in countering illegal wildlife trade with the air transportation sector. And Roseanne, maybe I can start with you, but tell us a story.
Yes, of course, Richard. Thank you. Well, Schiphol implemented many actions in a fight to combat wildlife trafficking. And I would like to highlight some of them. We are, like you said, joining and chairing ACI's Wildlife Trafficking Task Force. And Juliana Scafucci also introduced ACI, the Voice of World Airports. We are a member of the Royal Foundation after signing the Buckingham Palace Declaration. And the Royal Foundation negotiate within the transport industry to combat wildlife trafficking. And we designed our own zero tolerance policy. After we signed the BPD, and we take direct actions. We invest together with our stakeholders in raising awareness on and around Schiphol. We launch campaigns, we provide education for airport employees, and we share our experience worldwide. And I think, in a few years' time, we accomplished a lot, but it's only the beginning, of course, because we need recognition worldwide and collaborated action to get our hands on wildlife trafficking, to destroy this horrific crime and related criminal activities.
Terrific. Well, thank you. And thank you for all of your hard work. It sounds like you've really built a multi-layered approach here by signing on to a global declaration like the Buckingham Palace Declaration, joining the ACI World Task Force, but then really works to embed it into the processes and procedures there at the airport. Do I have that right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Balaji, I would love to hear from you. It's been a while since we saw each other in person in Washington, D.C. It's great to see you here. Tell us a story about your work there at Qatar Airlines.
Sure. Thanks, Richard. I guess as John Godson was saying, we were talking about the Cecil the Lion, which was shot in, and that's kind of where I was brought in. said, we have got this issue. How do we, there's various kind of rules and regulations that we had internally on what we can carry and what we couldn't carry. So bringing it all together was slapped on, and said, I wasn't very sure what this all meant, because that was not my background. And the whole story is about kind of saying, look, we've got this issue on hand, and there's a spotlight on the illegal wildlife trade. What do we do? What are the things that what's Qatar Airways' position? So that's the journey that we started on, and started having internal discussions with the internal stakeholders, external stakeholders like IATA, and then that's where we started having the conversation with the partners, various NGOs that was out there. And then from there on, we signed on the Buckingham Palace Declaration. We led the kind of development of bespoke training programs, and that was input from Routes Partnership and United for Wildlife, I should say. And then we have got robust systems for reporting and doing investigations. So we have come a long way, as Roseanne was saying, since we started in 2015. We've brought in some robust processes and systems, and built in some good relationships. That's kind of where we can go back and ask for if there's any doubt, I guess. So that's kind of it's a good, but we have got a long way to go. We still find illegal wildlife that's still ongoing. There's still some challenges on the way that can go through on that.
Can I just ask, so what I heard there was that this wasn't really your background, and this wasn't necessarily like the thing you were specializing on up until this moment, but you were able to draw on a lot of different resources from IATA, from United from Wildlife, from Routes. What was that like? Because I know there are a lot of other airlines listening in who might want to get involved. What was that like to go from not really knowing much about this to, yeah, hey, I'm going to go and make this a centerpiece of my work?
So that started with kind of having the push in from the senior management. There was a buy-in from the senior management, so that was critical for us. So that's there. We had the senior management buy-in, and then looked at kind of from a risk management perspective, from an environmental risk, from a business risk, economical risk, and social risk, that we kind of what are the risks and how do we manage those. So that kind of was the key part for us to kind of hone in and put this on our environmental and sustainability policy. It's one of the key items on the policy. So that's kind of how important it's kind of gained on. Building on from there, IATA, we've had that good relationship with IATA, obviously with John and his team, which was a great help. And then also with the United for Wildlife, and especially from Claire, Michelle, Megan, soon. So this had Corey. It's a great help, kind of, going back to them and saying, asking for some, help, clarification, because coming in from a background which I didn't know what CITES was, to a place where kind of we are leading within the group, Qatar Airways group. And keep in mind, it's not just the airline, but also the airport. That again adds a bit of a complexity for me, because we also manage the airport in Doha. So that's kind of working both with the airline and the airport authorities. And so that's kind of the help that was provided was definitely, it was helpful. The guidance was helpful, definitely, yeah.
So what I'm hearing is that, like, if I'm an airline and I'm thinking or an airport and I want to get involved, what I'm hearing from you is first, evaluate the risk. Secondly, engage partners, reach out to folks like IATA or United for Wildlife. Then third, get the training and resources that you need, and there's a lot of them that are available through Routes, and then adapt them to your own needs and implement them locally.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah, look, there's a lot of resources that's already been built. I think there's a lot of momentum that's been there. We just need to kind of go for it. We are all in it together.
Terrific. Thank you, Balaji. Anas, from coming in from Malaysia Airlines, we'd love to hear from you. So tell us a little bit about the story there. What's going on?
Okay, sure. Okay, hi. Hello everyone. Okay, Malaysia Aviation Group, okay, which is the umbrella company of Malaysia Airlines. Okay, we already have a policy against wildlife trafficking since 2016. So our group CEO and the senior management team has made a point that our company shall have zero tolerance against wildlife trafficking within the business operations. So yeah, in 2017, we started on to map out our initiatives, okay, mainly on to raise the awareness of the staff, okay, on the significance of wildlife trafficking issue. So our target group, okay, we started off with our crew, both pilots and cabin crew, our ground staff in the airports, the above the wing and also the below the wing, as well as our cargo staff. So the ground staff also includes our security officers, which works very closely with the airport authorities as well. So thanks to Claire and traffic team in November 2017. So that's how our relationship starts with Roots. So we're able to use training modules prepared by Roots for these awareness and training sessions. In 2019, so when we are able to gauge a little bit of increase of awareness sign among our staff, okay, we collaborate with RIMBA, okay, RIMBA, so that's how it's spelled. RIMBA is a local NGO based in Malaysia, providing canine units to sniff out contrabands in our cargo complex. So these two canine units are specifically trained to sniff out any wildlife contrabands in our cargo shipments. So yeah, that's another steps, which is unfortunately, however, this initiative has to stop because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So yeah, we started off in summary, we started off with raising the awareness with multiple sessions with traffic, and then we further collaborate with a local NGO based in our country.
Terrific. Thank you, Anis. And just one question. You mentioned engaging staff above the wing and below the wing. For those of us who aren't in aviation, what does that mean, above the wing and below the wing?
Right. Okay. So above the wing means the staff who are working at the check-in counters, the staff who are working at the boarding gates. So these are the people who would be able to identify if there's any possible traffickers or contrabands inside the luggage. So above the wings is for the people inside the airport. Below the wing people means those who works for the cargo shipments under the belly of the aircraft.
Terrific. Thank you so much.
Yep.
And thank you for that. You gave us a very good step-by-step process there for how you've implemented. And I also, I think one of the things that I thought was interesting, what you said there was about the importance of engaging with a local NGO who could bring in certain resources, including a canine unit. And speaking of canine units, I want to turn to Miguel Salamanca, because I know you run a canine unit there for the Colombian police. I also want to just quickly test our translation. So if you could just tell us a little bit about what it is you do on a daily basis when you're combating wildlife trafficking. And we can also hear if, for those of us who are listening in English, if the translation is working. But Miguel, a little bit about your day-to-day.
Buenos días a todos. Como venías diciendo, yo soy guía canino especializado en detección de fauna silvestre. Nosotros somos pioneros a nivel mundial sobre este tema. Venimos trabajando aproximadamente 6 años en el tema. Hemos hecho innumerables procedimientos gracias a los caninos especializados. Nosotros hemos enfocado esta nueva especialidad a los terminales, tanto aéreos como terrestres, donde es transportado ilegalmente las especies de fauna silvestre.
Terrific. Thank you, Miguel. And for those of you who are listening in English, if you drop into the English channel that's down at the bottom of your screen, you can hear what Miguel is saying in English. So, Miguel, can you give us a little bit of a flavor of that? I know you've been involved in over 6,000.
Dale, Richard.
Yeah. So, yeah, you've been involved in over 6,000 seizures. Can you give us an example of how that works when you're coordinating with an airport or with an airline?
Claro que sí, nosotros hemos hecho un trabajo mancomunado con la autoridad ambiental de acá de la Metropolitana de Bogotá, que es Secretaría Distrital de Ambiente, junto también con funcionarios del aeropuerto de Opaín. Normalmente se hace cuando ellos atienden los casos de primera mano de Opaín, ellos informan el caso o lo que se tenga que realizar. Nosotros llegamos al sitio, al sector, junto con Secretaría Distrital de Ambiente y hacemos el procedimiento. Si en caso de que haya que hacer una judicialización a una persona, yo hago el procedimiento policivo y Secretaría Distrital de Ambiente en estos casos hace el procedimiento sancionatorio.
Excellent. So what I'm hearing in that is that it sounds like you've worked out communication protocols between yourselves and the airport so that they know when to call you, and then how the procedural handoffs go between what the airline is doing as reporting, but then you're stepping in, maintaining the role of law enforcement, not asking airlines or airports to enforce the law, but to help you spot things and report them, so that then you can step in and play the role that you're supposed to play as police.
Exacto, cada entidad tiene su procedimiento. OPAIN sería la entidad que informe la situación o el delito como tal. Aquí en Colombia es considerado el delito el tráfico de flora y fauna silvestre. Secretaría hace la
Gotcha.
parte sancionatoria y nosotros como policía hacemos cumplir la ley conforme al reglamento que hay aquí en Colombia.
Mm-hmm. Two more quick follow-up questions for you, Miguel. Are the canines that you use specifically trained to detect wildlife, or are they also trained to detect other things?
No, estos caninos son especializados en la detección de fauna silvestre. Fueron creados para este fin, ya que, como deben saber ustedes, Colombia es uno de los países más ricos en biodiversidad y se ha visto mucho tráfico, se han encontrado bastantes especies traficadas en el aeropuerto y en diferentes sectores del país. Por tal motivo, quisimos atacar ese flagelo que se está viviendo aquí en Colombia.
Thank you. And then the last question, how satisfied are you with the follow-up on seizures and especially with regarding prosecutions?
Pues la parte como tal de nosotros, la policía y secretaría, estamos contentos porque se ha realizado bastantes procedimientos, se ha atacado mucho este delito. Es un poquito débil la parte jurídica, pero conforme a los procedimientos de secretaría y de policía se ha venido trabajando, se ha venido realizando los procedimientos que se tenga que hacer en estos casos de delitos y de contravenciones a nivel de la ley colombiana.
Thank you, Miguel. Very insightful. And thank you to Lance and Alexis for putting those questions into chat. If you have other questions for our panelists, please do drop them into chat and I'll try to get to as many of them as I can. Ian, sorry, I want to bring your voice into this. You kind of sit between many different parties here when it comes to combating wildlife trafficking in the transportation sector. I know you've been going around the world setting up regional task forces. Tell us a story, tell us how it's going, and maybe reflect on what you've heard from your fellow panelists.
Thanks, Richard. I've been fortunate to, like you said, be on both sides of the fence. was introduced to the routes partnership when I worked for an airline, so got to see it from that angle through routes, and a phenomenal display that they did at my airline with a lot of training, which was fantastic. And now on the United for Wildlife side, we can see the phenomenal partnerships that we're able to develop. We work very closely with a number of partners that are on this call: Traffic, IATA, ACI are doing great work. We work with associations like ASA as well. So we're seeing a lot of momentum. Like you said, we're setting up regional task forces. So our focus area has shifted from a more sort of global general approach to a regional approach where we can actually drill down into specific issues in each region. And we do that with our partners. So we are more focused, more effective, and we're looking forward to seeing better results working with everybody that is part of the task force.
Terrific. Thank you, Ian. I want to stick with you for a second. Can you give us an example of what you would say like exemplifies successful collaboration between the private sector, conservation organizations, and law enforcement? So maybe one good example from one of your regional task forces.
Sure. And there's a number. The one that pops to mind immediately was intelligence received over a particular airline that had a smuggling problem. We were able to contact local law enforcement. We were able to contact the airline at their destination. It was a case of abalone that was smuggled through a really odd point of departure. And working with the airline, working with law enforcement, and working with our partners, we were able to set up almost like a go team, if you like, so that we could monitor the shipment from the time it happened all the way to when it was reached its final destination. So that we could actually move that information across then to the financial side, so we could start looking at who was actually involved in the financial transactions too. That's a typical example of how we would approach a trafficking incident, or we would work with our partners to actually counter all of this illegal wildlife trafficking.
I want to turn now and kind of talk a little bit about challenges and barriers to overcome. And if I could just stick with you for another second, like in that example that you just gave, what were some of the challenges or lessons that you learned from that example?
Yeah, some of the challenges, because it happened over the weekend, it was a little more difficult to get hold of everybody that we needed to. So we learned a little bit about setting up predetermined go teams. We learned about making sure that we have our contacts ready and waiting. And we learned that we can't rely necessarily on something like an email. We need to set up multiple different channels of communication to ensure that we actually get the message across to everybody that needs to know about it. And the response is phenomenal. Everybody that's here and everybody that's involved actually want to make a difference. So once that communication goes out and once that information is released to those parties that will be affected, the response is fantastic.
So is thinking through some of the practical issues, like, what are we gonna do on a weekend, or how are we going to make sure that we keep lines of communication open, and that we really we understand how all the handoffs are going to occur?
Yeah, it's about communication, data transfer, intelligence gathering. There's so many things that go into it, but those are just some of the learnings that we took from those particular incidents.
Thank you, Ian. Balaji, I'd love to hear from you. So talk a little bit about the challenges you face, or that you think that maybe other airlines might face and airports might face.
Sure. So I think the couple of challenges that I would like to highlight. One is getting information from the authorities about the seizures. We find it really hard to get any information about the seizures from the authorities. If we get the information at the right time, we can act on it so that we can see how we can know the concealment methodology, and that's used by the trafficker to help prevent further trafficking, and also see which the details of the traffic and the whole lot. So we can provide those information to the authorities. So it's a two-way information exchange. That doesn't happen. Most of the times we either get it from the newspaper or the internet, or sometimes even we get it from the team in Malaysia, so Kuala Lumpur. They send the information there. You get some of those information from the team there. So it's a hit and miss. So it's the challenge is to the exchange of information with the authorities. That's an ongoing challenge. The other issue is the availability of technology at the airports to scan the illegal wildlife. There is kind of the focus is on the safety issue rather than the illegal wildlife, the organic products that get scanned up. The people are not looking for it. The scanning equipment is not kind of programmed for it at this point of time, I guess. So that becomes an issue. So those are a couple of high-level challenges, I guess, from an external perspective. Internally, there'll be challenges kind of getting in buy-in, or if there's from an organization perspective, and also how do you raise awareness of the staff that so that they become your eyes and ears? So that definitely is a challenge.
So data sharing and understanding what kinds of data can be shared by whom and to where and with whom. I know this is a recurring issue with law enforcement, because I'm sure that they're trying to protect investigations and ongoing cases, but then there's also a need for what kind of information would be useful to you as an airline or an airport. And then there's the availability of the technology and the time and the focus versus like what's already programmed into those devices and the training that's already been given to the airline personnel to detect weapons and bombs and things like that versus focusing on wildlife.
Absolutely. Look, I understand the part where the authority says, so it's trying to look at this information that we can't share because there's an investigation happening, but we do have the details of who has booked the cargo or who's coming. We've got those details of the passenger, how they are booked. So we can share that information. If you are ready to kind of say this is what's happened, we can share that information. That's useful for your investigation. I think it's a two-way traffic information sharing. That has to happen. If we try hard to get the information, but it's very hard. It's like hen's teeth.
Yeah. Thanks, Balaji. Roseanne, your thoughts here, particularly on this issue of data sharing and working with the authorities?
Yes, it's very important to keep on collecting data and sharing data, because that's in general where you need to know what the problem is. And especially while talking about wildlife trafficking, it's very important to get inside where's the supply, where's the demand in order to stop wildlife trafficking. So in fact, you need a lot of data. If you look at Schiphol, for example, we are a big transit airport, a hub. And we are unfortunately seen as the biggest airport in Europe from the wildlife trafficking perspective. But because we are a transit airport, for us it's very valuable, and I think the only way to take action and to stop wildlife trafficking through Schiphol is where's the request for the wildlife, for the part of wildlife, and where's it coming from. So it's always a matter of it starts somewhere and there's an end station of where it's collected and where it's traded again. So for us, data is very important to get inside what are the high priority routes, what's our point of like, where can we start talking to the airports, where does it start being trafficked. So for us, it's still very important to have as much as data as we can. So, and we do share our data. It's owned by customs, but it's also shared by customs for the route reports and stuff. So hopefully there will be more data available and more airports and airlines are willing to share their data. That's really important.
Are there other major challenges that you see and kind of taking your efforts to the next level?
Yeah, the fact that we really have to combat wildlife trafficking together. And also it's still quite challenging working with the internal stakeholders. I did see some questions in the chat as well about authorities, and I do recognize this because it took a while before we got in touch with customs, and it's really I think it's really important. And what I learned is that it's best to like reach out to them and start talking to your stakeholders. Try to find your influence in the chain, not pointing towards a particular stakeholder, but dive into the roles, responsibilities, and ask how you can help them. Maybe they need more tools or more education. There's a lack of personnel. You just, yeah, reach out to them, talk to them, and get an overview of how they work and where's a need for them to make their work better. So I think that's really important. And also as an airport, from the airport's perspective, we do have a lot of influence because a lot of our stakeholders, we choose them ourselves. So we are in the position to set requirements, and that's how we work with our zero tolerance policy in order to, yeah, like raise awareness and set requirements to, yeah, to straighten the network.
Yeah.
And because you have a lot of influence, and we also train and educate our airport staff who are the eyes on the floor, you know, the security companies, baggage handling, etc., ground handling. So yeah.
So yeah, so what I'm hearing there is there's a challenge always with multi-stakeholder engagement and keeping both the folks inside and outside aligned. But I'm also hearing you say, don't underestimate your influence as an airline. You actually have a fair amount of both informal and formal influence over the many different parties, both contractually and informally. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, and you said airline. I'm talking from the airport's perspective, but we are collaborating with many airlines as well. We have, yeah, like we're working together with IATA, ACI, of course. So it's airdrome language or aviation language.
Right. Yeah. Thank you for that. Anis, your thoughts, and in particular, I'd love any thoughts you might have on this issue of collaboration with authorities and with customs, but also just what do you see as the major challenges as you were getting off the ground and as you're trying to scale your efforts?
Right. Well, I think I'm going to have to concur with Balaji and Roseanne in the sense of communication perspective. Like, I personally think that the biggest challenge is the lack of consistent communication and proper platform for such communication to discuss wildlife trafficking issue with the relevant stakeholders, be it with other airlines or the airports or even the authorities. So given the severity of the issue, you know, we always have this thought that perhaps it would be apt to include wildlife trafficking issue as permanent agenda in the airlines association meetings, like in IATA, you know, the ACI or AAPA. So with or even other, you know, regular meetings with the airport stakeholders and the authorities. The stakeholders in the aviation industry should also be more open to securely share the data and intelligence regarding wildlife trafficking so that we could really disrupt the movement of the contrabands. Because say, for example, in Kuala Lumpur International Airport itself, you know, when we engage with the authorities, sometimes the authorities have other priorities, for example, drugs cases or, you know, counterfeits goods. That's, I mean, perhaps in their perspective, it's much more serious case than wildlife trafficking, for example. So, you know, it's getting the buy-in for every stakeholders in the airport environments is very, very crucial. So that's why, hence I put the phrase of lack of consistent communication. You know, sometimes the topic is up, sometimes the topic is absent in a proper platform, so to say. Yeah. So yeah, I feel that that's the biggest challenge that I've been going through so far.
Gotcha. Thank you, Anis, and I want to thank all of you for your reflections there on communications and data sharing. We actually have a breakout group that we're going to do later today just on that issue. So I know there's been some discussion in the chat on it as well. So please do, for those of you who are listening in and you want to dive in on that issue, I hope that you'll join that breakout group in a few minutes. I want to turn though back to you, Miguel, and get your thoughts on two things. One, there's been some discussion here amongst your airport and airline colleagues about data sharing with law enforcement. I'd love any thoughts you have on that. But there's also been a question in the chat about shark fin. And I know that you guys did a fairly large seizure of shark fin. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on combating shark fin trade as well.
Claro que sí, Richard. Primero, contestando la primera pregunta, pues aquí en Colombia hay muy buena comunicación. Aquí hay varias entidades que trabajamos en el aeropuerto. Está el ICA, está la DIAN, está Secretaría Distrital de Ambiente. Nosotros como Policía Ambiental, entonces tenemos un conjunto de trabajo excelente. Eh, de pronto haría como falta una comunicación más directa porque siempre como el llamado se hace es a la central de comunicaciones y no como tal al funcionario de policía que sería yo. Entonces, de pronto ese es como la falencia que yo veo en la comunicación, pero en general tenemos muy buena comunicación. Conforme a la pregunta que me haces de las aletas de tiburón, se hizo un procedimiento acá en el aeropuerto de carga, donde se realizó una incautación de más de 3.000 aletas de tiburón. Ese procedimiento está en manos de la fiscalía, quien está haciendo eh, las investigaciones pertinentes. Este procedimiento se realizó conjuntamente Secretaría Distrital de Ambiente, información de funcionarios de OPAIN. Nosotros como Policía Ambiental hicimos el procedimiento de la incautación y en este momento está como te digo, en investigación por parte de funcionarios de la Fiscalía y se adelantó el procedimiento administrativo por parte de Secretaría Distrital de Ambiente.
Terrific. Thank you for sharing that. And that's a fantastic picture of the seizure there. Ian, I'd like to come to you and say, love to hear your thoughts. I think what we're hearing from our aviation colleagues and from Miguel is that we need more consistent communication. And it also, I think, comes down to knowing who to call when about what. And I know that's something that you've worked a lot on in the regional task forces. Can you say a little bit more about how we might tackle this challenge and maybe lay out a couple of issues for us to discuss in our breakout group to come?
Right, thanks, Richard. So we do know that it's an issue. Communications can be quite tricky and quite difficult. So within the regional chapters that we've established and are establishing, on the transport side, we've broken it down further into working groups. So for example, we will have all of the airports in a region in a particular working group so that airports can speak to each other in a language that they can understand. What we don't necessarily want is an airport working group having to speak to a maritime shipping company because they're speaking different languages. So we've identified that we do need to collaborate, incredibly important, because if we don't collaborate and come together, we're not going to be successful. And we're trying to facilitate these working groups so that we can get people talking to each other and we can then get working groups all around the world speaking to each other. So for instance, if we have an incident in South Africa and we find out that, wow, there's this new completely crazy way that people are now starting to smuggle, lion bones, we can then push that information through to all of the airports and all of the airlines if those working groups are involved. So we're trying to set up these working groups to facilitate the transfer of information to address specifically that issue, where a lot of organizations don't have the information at hand. They feel like they are sort of reaching into the dark. So we're working actively to change that approach, to get people talking and collaborating so that we can fight this. It's the only way that we can actually be effective at fighting this.
Do you think, to what degree do you think it comes down to people not understanding the importance of wildlife crime on the ground?
Well, absolutely. Unless you dive into the subject and you understand what is going on, you don't really have a great sense of the scale of the problem. The fact that we've lost 60% of our wildlife in the last 50 years is astonishing and alarming. And the fact that this industry is worth, when you include the logging industry, over $200 billion per annum should tell you something about the sheer size, scale, and sophistication of the problem. and we work and working with organizations like Routes, getting that message out there, working with traffic and everybody else. We bring the messages to all of these different regions so that we can actually introduce people to the problem. And then we try to also make it about more than just those sort of top 5 trafficking species, because people go, okay, well, it's rhino horns and it's pangolins and it's tiger bones, but it's actually not. It's the exotic pet trade. And because of the scale of the problem, we often say to people, you are talking to us and you say that it doesn't really affect your port or your airport. And we can say to you straight-faced that we guarantee that this trade affects your particular port or your particular airport or your particular airline, because of the sheer size of the trade. So we're working to try and get that message across so that people can understand this is a huge problem and it's leading to massive diversity loss. And it is going to affect us in material ways going forward.
And no, thank you for that. I think it is very important that we emphasize for folks not only the importance of the global impact, but also to make it very local and make sure they understand that it is something that is occurring in their country, in their airport, on their airline, and that it affects us all. So thank you for that work, Ian. We've got about 4 minutes left here. And the closing question that I'd like to ask everyone is, how do you see this moving forward? And beyond the life of the Routes partnership, what activities will your organization continue championing to ensure wildlife trafficking remains a priority? And if I could start with you, Balaji. You're muted, sir. Balaji, you're on mute.
Sorry.
That's great.
So tackling wildlife is part of the way that we do business now in Qatar Airways. I guess we've taken a lead on this issue. With the cargo, we have recently launched We Care program to look at making sure that we transport this wildlife back to their home, into the wild. We also are constantly looking on our product, I guess, offerings and systems to ensure that the robustness of it. So internally, those are the things that we're working on. Going forward, I guess, from a perspective, our chief executive is the chair of the One World Alliance now. So we do kind of continue to actively promote that within the members to sign up for the Buckingham Palace Declaration. So and also kind of give that support where it's required. We offer that. So if there's anything that's required from what the lessons that we have learned, the things that we have developed, more than happy to share that among the group and also wider, I guess, with this group here as part of the Routes partnership. So that's kind of where we are looking at kind of going forward. So it's not about just having internal kind of robustness, but also making sure that the others, we are all in it together, as I said. So it's kind of, we can support each other.
Yeah, fantastic. So you've embedded it in the way you're doing business. You're advocating across the industry and making best use of your chairmanship now of the One World Alliance, and you're going to continue to learn and share with others in the industry. So thank you for that, Balaji. Miguel, if I could come to you, and I actually want to ask you one other specific question. In addition to what your agency is going to be doing moving forward, we've had a question about on the shark fin. Did that investigation include attempting to investigate or prosecute the trafficker at the point of departure?
Sí, claro, la investigación tiene que ser completa. De dónde salieron las aletas, de dónde vienen, para dónde iban destinadas, quién las envió. La investigación tiene que ser totalmente completa, pues, para dar con los responsables de este delito.
And how will the agency be championing and moving forward?
Hacia el futuro seguimos trabajando nosotros como Policía Nacional, haciendo cumplir la normatividad, haciendo los procedimientos de incautación, judicialización, los procedimientos a que dé lugar. Se viene trabajando nosotros por la parte preventiva, haciendo campañas de sensibilización a las personas, evitando de que las personas pues transporten especies sin tener la información o sin ignorar de que hay una ley que castiga este delito.
Mm. So you're going to continue executing on your mandate, but you're also going to start to pivot now to being more preventative, raising awareness, and kind of building off of what Ian said, making sure that people are aware of the seriousness of this crime. Thanks, Miguel. Roseanne, your last thoughts.
Vale, muchas gracias, Richard.
Yeah, my last thoughts on beyond the life of roads, you mean?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
That question, that particular question, yes. Well, yeah, our priority remains raising awareness, focus on collaboration, collecting and sharing data, extend education to our employees, and yeah, keep focus on high priority routes to stop the wildlife trafficking there where it begins. And that's very important for us because, like I said, we are such a big hub and transit airport. So that's where we can make the difference. So we should keep focus on the chain and breaking in the chain while looking at like supply and demand. And not only saying that we are that we do not tolerate any illegal wildlife trade being trafficked through our gates, but we really need to take targeted actions to book success and to make the difference. And last but not least, we are looking forward to join ACI's brand new APEX, an audit program on wildlife trafficking. I think, which I believe is a very important step forward. So, because yeah, like only together we can combat wildlife trafficking worldwide. And we will always keep on trying to share our experience worldwide as much as we can. And we will also reach out to others to be inspired ourselves, of course.
Thank you. So prioritize, target, deepen, and share, and continuing on, and especially working on great things like the Apex audit. So thank you so much, Roseanne. Anis, your thoughts?
Well, Malaysia Alliance recently launched our sustainability blueprints, and under ethical operations elements, we include our pledge and commitment to continue combating against human and wildlife trafficking. So ergo, awareness and training sessions will continue and be part of compulsory training modules yearly for all the staff, mainly the crew, the ground staff, as well as the cargo staff. And we will also continue to work with the local and regional NGOs and the authorities to rally the support in addressing this issue moving forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Anis. Ian, your last thoughts here. You're muted, sir.
We are going to try and facilitate more effective communication. We are busy looking at resourcing in terms of some kind of data management, so that we can manage the flow of data and we can provide information. We're busy establishing phenomenal links with law enforcement, and we've resourced our financial task force so that we can actually make the link between not only the crime on the transport side, but we can give it to our financial side to ensure that there's some follow-up and to ensure that we can actually get the right information about who the traffickers are to the right authorities. So again, it's about making sure that we find these traffickers, we chase them down, and we are effective in dealing with them, whether it's on the financial side or the transport side.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you to all of our panelists, to Balaji, Roseanne, Anis, Miguel, and Ian. You guys, champions, truly. We called this the Champions Panel, and you guys truly are champions for this work. And what I'm hearing from you is that we're going to continue to deepen and focus our work. We're going to prioritize and implement as we move these ideas more and more into the way that we do business on a daily basis. We're going to look to facilitate more effective communications and data sharing. We're going to do the right resourcing and continue to raise awareness so that we can ultimately raise and prevent wildlife crime before it occurs. Thank you all so much for that. We're going to move into a break now, and we're about 4 minutes behind schedule. But we're going to give you the full 10-minute break. So it's currently 9:34 or 9:35 here on the East Coast of the United States. We're going to do two things. We're going to pull up a poll, because when we come back from break, we're going to give you an interactive presentation of the different resources that we have. But after that, we're going to go into breakout groups, and we're going to really look to try to deepen some of the conversation that's already started in the chat. And Owen, if you could bring up that poll, yes, we'll ask you to pick from one of these 4 breakout groups. You can pick actually up to 2. We can't guarantee you'll get your first choice, but if you could select your top 2 choices, we'll try to get you into the right breakout group. So please do select your top 2 choices as we go to break. We're going to reconvene in 10 minutes, which will be 9:45 here in Washington, D.C. And when we come back, we'll have our resources presentation. As we go to break, we're also going to play this Champions video for you. Feel free to stick around and watch that, but you can also go get a cup of coffee and come back and watch it as well. But otherwise, we'll see you back here at 9:45.
As a little girl, as I grew up, along the road you could see zebras, you could see buffaloes. But I worry if the future generation, if they will still have this, or will they have to see these animals only when they're caged.
It's very, very saddening to see the way in which wildlife is being transported from one country to another country, and this needs to stop.
Wildlife crime and trafficking touches every part of the globe. It's really escalated, particularly in the last 20 years or so, driven by a really growing consumer demand for illicit wildlife, but also facilitated through things like the internet and the transport sector, particularly the aviation industry. The illegal wildlife trade is valued globally at around $20 billion per year, which is quite staggering. And it's not just about that profit that criminal groups are making, it's causing major risks for species and pushing some species to the edge of extinction.
Illegal wildlife trade harms the wild population of animals and is further pushing endangered species towards extinction. This triggers a negative impact on the world's ecosystems and has also been linked to disease outbreaks in some countries and regions. This also poses a threat to international security, with organised crime syndicates committing crimes.
Wildlife trafficking is connected to a wide variety of criminal activities. For example, murder on park rangers, money laundering, weapon trade. And even if you do not care about wildlife, there is a piece connected to wildlife trafficking that hits you as well.
The US Agency for International Development, USAID, co-created the Routes Partnership to bring together private sector, public sector, conservation groups and the air transport industry to help combat wildlife trafficking in the transport sector. Routes is engaged with nearly 50 companies. They've come together in a partnership that really is helping to disrupt and stop illegal wildlife trade in the air industry.
As the national carrier, we have taken it upon ourselves to ensure that as part of our policy, we look into the welfare of our national flora and fauna, which includes efforts against wildlife trafficking in Malaysia Airlines. We work very closely with Routes. They have trained our employees on how to detect wildlife, how to report, and what needs to be done as well. We do get a lot of data from them. We use this internally, and then we do a lot of risk mapping to determine what are the hotspots. And from there, we will then work with local authorities, customs, and so on and so forth in our efforts against wildlife trafficking.
Etihad Airways had shown that the airlines can make a major contribution to eradicating wildlife crimes. We have strong collaboration with Routes by providing us specific training materials for our staff in cargo, ground, and operation, as well as in in-flight crews.
Cargo plays an important part as a gatekeeper from the start to the end, where illegal imports and exports may take place from airport to airport. Etihad Aviation Group has developed an animal welfare and conservation policy, complying with all UAE and federal laws under CITES and IUCN when it comes to the transportation of wildlife.
At Kenya Airways, we have long supported wildlife conservation issues to promote better protection of endangered wildlife and to reduce the demand for illegal wildlife products.
The issue of illegal wildlife trade can be complex for passengers, and many of them feel powerless. We have broken this barrier by working with our partners such as Kenya Airport Authority.
We have been collaborating with our stakeholders at the airport in ensuring there is a harmonized screening procedure.
Our staff are our foot soldiers, so we are giving them awareness training on what is illegal wildlife trafficking, and what are the key items that they should actually be looking out for?
The incidents that we used to have before some of the efforts that are in place right now were quite many. But since this multi-agency approach has been implemented, we have had a reduction of the incidents. Wild animals need to be protected in their natural habitat.
For Schiphol, health, safety and environment is important. Schiphol implemented many actions to combat wildlife trafficking. We joined and chaired the ACI's Wildlife Trafficking Task Force. ACI is the Airports Council International, the voice of world's airports. Schiphol became involved in the Roots partnership when ACI asked us to join its newborn Wildlife Trafficking Task Force. A very important moment for us because joining and even chairing the task force provided us with important tools to take action against wildlife trafficking.
Routes has set this major platform for the air transport industry to understand and know how it can deal with wildlife trafficking across these supply chains. The tools are there, the training is there, the e-learning systems are there. So we're really grateful for those champions and the companies that have come together under the Routes partnership. And I think together we can make that lasting difference for wildlife for years to come.